Hey guys, welcome back. I'm Macon Campbell and this is Making Stuff. So today I'm going to take you through the entire process of modeling something in 3D, in this case using Shaper 3D, and then getting those files ready for cutting on the CNC, which means laying out and exporting the vectors, and then bringing that into Illustrator and preparing the files for import into VCarve Pro, which is what I use to create my toolpaths, all the way to creating the actual toolpaths and putting them on the CNC, cutting them, and finally sanding and finishing the entire project. So I'm choosing a fairly basic project here because otherwise this video is just going to be way too long. Hey guys, it's Future Macon here. I've just spent the last 2 weeks editing this video, and to be perfectly honest, I'm seriously contemplating whether or not I should even upload this video because of how long it ended up being. My initial draft cut of this video was close to 3 hours, but I've just spent the last week or so trying to trim and cut and speed up as much of the video as I possibly could, and it still ended up over 2 hours. But at the end of the day, I did set out to make a fairly in-depth step-by-step tutorial of this whole process, and unfortunately that's just how long it takes. I just wanted to mention here quickly that I am going to do my best to add as many timestamps in this video as possible in an effort to make it easier for you guys to navigate the video and find the parts that are most relevant to your project or whatever it is that you wish to learn out of this video. So I just wanted to take a moment to apologize for how long this video is. I'm sure that there are going to be some people that are going to appreciate such an in-depth video, but I'm also sure that there are probably going to be many people that are going to be annoyed by the length of this video. I know that there might be a lot of information in here that might seem useless, but I really feel that there are quite a few little tips and tricks throughout that might be useful for some users. So with that said, let's get back to the video. So the project I want to make today is a basic stool. I'm going to give you a bit of backstory on why I'm creating the stool and what I'm creating it for. If you want to skip this, I'll drop a timestamp somewhere so that you can skip to where I start making it. So basically, for those of you that don't know, I play inline hockey, which is similar to ice hockey, except you play it on inline skates. Now, a couple of the places that we go to play tournaments in Namibia do not always have sufficient seating for all the people when you're getting dressed and getting ready for your games. Those of you that do play ice hockey or inline hockey, you know that it is very difficult to get dressed and put on your skates if you don't have a place to sit. So my idea was to come up with some kind of simple stool that I can fold up, stack together, and keep inside my hockey bag so that when I don't have a place to sit, I can just take my little stool out, assemble it, and basically make life a whole lot easier for myself. Okay, so naturally the first thing that I did is I hopped onto Google to see what other people have come up with. So let me switch over to the computer screen here and show you what I found. So here are a number of different designs for stools that are made mainly on the CNC. And the one that I was gravitating towards is this one here by Shopbot. So I don't know if these files are available for purchase, but I'm going to be designing my own anyway. So if we take a closer look at this specific stool over here, it seems like this one is going to be assembled, and as you can see there are screw holes in the top here, which in other words means that it's not meant to be taken apart. So I'm going to have to make a couple of changes in order for this to work for me. So if I do not put screws into the top of this seat, obviously if I try to pick up the stool by the seat, the legs are going to fall out. So I haven't exactly figured out how I'm going to get past that problem, but we're going to cross that bridge when we get there. So using this as an idea, let's jump into Shaper 3D and get started. Okay, so here we are inside my Shaper 3D workspace. So let's just click new project. So this will be my very first Shaper 3D tutorial, so please go easy on me. I've only been using Shaper 3D now for roughly 4 months. I first downloaded it in December last year, and I have been thoroughly enjoying it so far. The program I used before was Autodesk's Fusion 360, which is a really nice program, but some of the main reasons that I decided to switch to Shaper 3D was because it was a little bit more user-friendly. It can natively run on an iPad, which means that I can do my designs on the go, and one of the nice things is that I can use my iPad as an AR device and project my project into any space where I want to put it. One of the other reasons is also that Shaper 3D is a little bit cheaper than Fusion 360. Currently I'm just on the monthly plan because I first wanted to see if this program was something that I'm going to be using long term, which by now I really think that I am. So at some point I'll probably move over to the yearly subscription and save some money there. So one of the things that I like about Shaper 3D compared to Fusion 360 is that it does receive very regular updates, and it seems that they do really listen to the community, and a lot of the features that users are looking for, they do bring in their regular updates. I was a bit worried at first. Some of the features that I'm used to using in Fusion 360 were not available in Shaper 3D when I started using it. But I'm really happy to see that as I've started using it, a lot of those features that I've been looking for have slowly been incorporated into the new updates, which I will get into once we start modeling. But I digress. Apologies for getting a little carried away there. So without any further ado, let's jump into modeling. So the first thing I'm going to do is jump into a sketch on the front plane, and I'm going to start modeling the basic profile of the legs. So I'm going to grab the line tool here, and I'm going to use construction line. Just going to drag this up here. So as you can see, if it turns green, that means it's fully constrained and cannot be moved. So what I'm going to do with this guideline is I'm going to set this to the height of the stool, and I want to create it in such a way that I can make changes to the stool later on if I feel like it. And to do that, I'm going to click on here. If you select this little variable icon here, you can create the length over here, which puts that at the top over here in your history tree as a variable, and that you can change later and it'll update your model. So what I'm going to do is just say okay. Then I'm going to go and change this to 450 millimeters, I think is good. And I'm going to change this name, and I'm going to call it tool underscore height. So I'll have to zoom out a little bit here. So what you'll see now is that if I change the height of the stool to 600, it's going to automatically update the height of the stool. So these variables are something that has only come in recently in one of the updates, and that was something that I was really waiting for, because that makes it a lot easier to make changes to your model later on. So with that sketch selected, I'm going to start a line from anywhere over here, and I'm going to move it out to there. I'm just setting these lines randomly for now, and then I'll go and constrain them later up to there. And then I'm going to create a curve from there to here. As you can see, I'm only creating half of it now, and then I'm going to mirror that over later. So I wanted the width of this leg also to be a variable, so I'm going to create that variable here, create length. Okay, so I basically want the top or the seat of this stool to be roughly 300 millimeters in diameter or in width. I haven't decided if I'm going to make it round or square yet, so I'll create the length over here to be 300. But now, because I'm only creating half of this, I have to change this over here. So I'm going to select this length. I'm going to go in here. Oh wait, I first want to change the name of this to seat underscore diameter. And then I'm going to have to make some changes over here, because that obviously is not going to work. So I'm going to select this. I'm going to create seat diameter, divide by 2, minus, let's say, 10. So that's going to give me 140. That means I'm going to have 5 millimeters sticking out on either side, which in fact I think I need more. So I'm going to say minus, let's say, 20. Well, this might seem a little bit complicated right now, but you'll see later it's going to work out really nicely. So I want the base of the leg to be the same width as the seat. So I'm going to create seat diameter there as well. Okay, I don't have to do that, divide by 2 again. Divide by 2, and now I can move this around. Okay, so I want this to come in here at a 90-degree angle. So let me see if I can create a constraint like that. Okay, there's not a constraint for 90 degrees available. So I'm going to take a line, convert it to construction. I'm going to just draw it out randomly over here. I'm going to select that line. I'm going to constrain it horizontally. So now if I select the circle, the arc, and that line, I can make them tangent. So that's going to mean it's going to come perfectly in there. So that means when I mirror it, it's going to make a perfect half circle. So right now, that's not constrained yet, but I do want this little foot piece over here to be about 50 millimeters. I don't need to create a variable for that, because no matter what I change over here, I'm going to want that to be the same. So over here, I can still make some changes. I think I'm going to create a radius 100. Should be good. So what else needs to be constrained over here? So this needs to be horizontal. So now that's right. And then obviously, because this is going to be at the bottom of the seat part, I want that distance to be exactly the thickness of the material. So I'm going to create a variable for a material thickness as well. I'm going to create that, and I'm going to say rename this to material thickness, and I'm going to make the material thickness 19 millimeters. 19 millimeters, if I'm not mistaken, is roughly 3/4 of an inch. The material I'm going to be using is actually 18 millimeters. Now this 18 millimeter material that I'm using is construction grade shutterboard or plywood, but from using it over the last couple of years, I've realized that most of the time it comes in a little bit thicker. So with that, half of my sketch is fully constrained. So I can select all of these lines, and I can say mirror it along that edge, and that's good to go. Okay, so once I've created a sketch like this, I like to just check that all my variables are working. So I'm just going to exit out of sketch here, and as you can see, I forgot to change this stool height back to 450. So let's just change that back to 450, and then what you'll see is that all of my variables are performing the way they should. If I change this to say 50, which is drastic, you'll see that the height is reduced over here because my material is going to be 50 millimeters thick. Let's change that back to 19. I want the seat diameter to be 350. That's going to change. Okay, so I can see that this measurement here hasn't updated. So let's have a look why that happened. Seat diameter divided by 2. Why is that not working? Let's just have a look here. This constraint conflicts with existing ones. I think it might be this arc that is creating problems here. So I'm going to just take that off. Some of that can move around. Let's try and set this again. Seat diameter divided by 2. Okay, so that's fixed the problem. So obviously constraining this with the radius was not a good idea. So what I'm going to try and do is select that and that. Okay, tangent's not going to work there. See if I lock this height. Maybe if I do that. Let's see, width 400, width 200. Okay, that seems to be working. Let's put that back to 300. Okay, looks like that fixed the problem. So while you're modeling something like this, you might run into problems like that, but then you're just going to have to, through trial and error, try and figure out which constraints are causing problems and just fix them. So this is the basic outline of one of the legs. As you can see, I haven't added in the tenons over here, so I'm just going to do that quickly. And to just draw it in like that randomly, and then I'll constrain them. This one and this one and this one I'm going to make horizontal, vertical. This I want to be, haven't decided about that yet. Let's just put this in. I want the tab to be say 30. That looks good. and I want the height of this to be material thickness, I think. Okay, if I make this material thickness, then what's going to happen is that this tenon is going to poke through the whole seat and you're going to see it from the top. I actually want this tenon to be hidden, so what I'm going to say is material thickness minus, let's say, 5, which makes it 14 millimeters. Let's make it minus 6. So the tenon I want to be away from the edge by, say, let's make it 30 also. Okay, so that's fully constrained. So obviously now I've created this tenon after I've mirrored this across. So I'm just going to select that again and mirror that across the same axis. And there we have it. Okay, so after zooming out a little bit, I feel like these tenons might be a little bit narrow. So I'm going to change that to, let's say, 50. Let's see what that looks like. Okay, I like that a little bit better. So now that we have this panel designed, we can extrude it. So what I'm going to do is select that as well as the tenons, and I'm going to extrude it half of the material thickness. Material thickness divide by 2, and the reason for that is because then I'm going to go to this extrusion and I'm going to make it symmetrical. So that means that if I select that and that, my material thickness is going to be 19, as you can see down there. So just to double check that everything's working again, let's make it 25, and as you can see, it's updated the height of these tenons as well as the thickness of the material. Let's undo that, and let's just check the rest of our variables again. Let's make that 600. That looks good. Let's make this 400, and that's good too. Undo, undo. Okay, so now that we have that, I'm going to double click this object. I'm going to copy it and I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees. And we have basically both of our leg pieces there. So obviously there's no joinery holding these pieces together. So what I'm going to do is create another sketch on this plane over here, and then I'm going to project these lines onto that sketch. And I'm going to grab a rectangle tool here. I'm going to snap it to there, and I'm not going to snap it there. I'm just going to put it somewhere random so that I can define the height later. As you can see, it is not green, so that means this one hasn't snapped. So if we move this around, snap it there, now that's green. We can't move this, so that's good. So we can set the height of this. I could use a specific measurement here, but what I'm going to do is I like to use the variables that I already have set up to drive the rest of my measurements. So I'm going to go stool height, divide by 2 maybe. Okay, so I feel like that's a bit high. So I'm going to say divide by 3 maybe. And yeah, I feel like that's pretty good. So before we carry on, just want to name some of my pieces here. So if I select this one, that's the body. I'm just going to name this leg underscore 1. And that means this one is going to be leg underscore 2. So I can hide leg number 2. And then I can grab that part of the sketch and I can extrude that. And I'm going to extrude that material thickness as well. So that means if I make any changes to the material thickness, that's going to update too. So sketch, I'm just going to hide, bring back my other leg. So now what I need to do is cut this feature out of the other leg. So I'm going to select leg 2 and I'm going to hit subtract and select the other leg and say done. So as you'll see, by default, if you use subtract feature, it's going to delete your tool body. So I can just go back to this boolean here and say keep tool bodies. The other option is if you use the subtract tool, there are options here to keep originals. You can keep the removed bodies or the modified bodies. I just forgot to do that first, but it's easy enough to fix here in your history tree. Now, just a little bit of a tangent here. The history tree, as you can see over here, is a very powerful and useful feature that has been brought into Shaper 3D recently. Now, I know a lot of the original users of Shaper 3D are not too happy with this new feature that's added because it's different to what they're used to. Coming from a background in Fusion 360 where you have a full history at the bottom of your workspace, that's something that I really got used to using, and it was very helpful and very powerful once you understand how it works. There are some features that I might have to add later, and then I'll show you how we can go back into the history and make changes to any of the parts of our project. I think what most people are finding irritating is that every single action that you make in your workspace gets added as basically an event in your history tree. So if I just take this and I move it over there, you'll immediately see a movement there in the history tree. Sometimes when you want to make changes to your model and you add those changes at the end of your history tree, that kind of makes it a little bit cumbersome. So I always try to find ways in which I can go back to specific steps and affect changes over there. So if you go to, say, this extrusion over here and you insert a breakpoint over there, you can edit this model in this specific space and time. So you'll see that any edits that you make here will get squeezed between these two actions. Now obviously you have to be very careful sometimes when you're adding in steps between other steps, because if you do something wrong, that can create lots of problems down your timeline. And I think that's kind of what upsets people, because they're not used to using Shaper 3D that way and they sort of run into problems. Now I oftentimes do run into problems like that, but I've sort of figured out ways to find out where those problems are and how to fix them. And I think once you understand how that works, then it's not really as much of a problem. But that being said, let's remove this breakpoint and carry on with the seat. What I'm going to do for the seat, I'm going to start by adding a sketch on this plane over here. Looking at it from the top like this, I think instead of making a round seat, I think I'm going to make square seat. So what I'm going to do is select the rectangle tool, but the center rectangle tool, and snap it to this point over here. Just drag that some random amount, and then I'm going to define all of these edges. I think I actually want to make it wider in one direction than the other. So what I'm going to do is, this is top view, so I'm going to make this the seat diameter, and actually I want to make this the seat diameter, and then this I want to make, let's say, seat diameter plus, let's say, 50. Okay, see what that looks like. I think that's going to work. Actually, come to think of it, I don't think I want to do that. I think I'm just going to keep this seat diameter. So now that I have that created, I'm just going to select this and I'm going to extrude this up. Material thickness, as you'll see over here, it immediately cut away our tabs, but that's because it was set to subtract by default. So if you extrude any sketch through another object, it will automatically subtract. So you can just set that to new body, and that's not exactly what we wanted. So let's just quickly hide these legs, go back to this extrusion and edit it, and then we can select everything and bring back our legs, and everything is right with the world. So just grab this seat. Obviously you'll see if we lift it up there, those tenons are not cut out into this part. Undo that, double click this, and we're going to hit subtract again and select this leg and this leg, and you'll see it's previewing the cutouts over there. So let's just do this. Keep originals, the removed bodies, say yes, and there you have it. So if we lift that up now, then we'll see that those tenons are cut out there. So in a case like this, where I just quickly moved this object so that I could see what's going on underneath there, some people might select that and move it back and then get upset that their history tree is getting cluttered, because now they have two movements there where they actually didn't want to have any because they just wanted to check something. So just be careful of stuff like that. So in this case, just undo that last movement to clean up your history tree. Now I'm going to just grab these corners and put a fillet on them, or a chamfer, or whatever you want to call it. So if you move inwards, it'll create a chamfer. If you move outwards, it'll create a fillet. So I think I'm going to put a 50 millimeter radius fillet on there. As you'll see, obviously missed that one, but that's the nice thing about the history tree. So you can go back to this fillet over here, just click edit, and you can just add whichever ones you want. So I think I want to add some fillets on these bottom edges as well. So sometimes I'll just grab one, add the fillet, let's say 10 mil, and then it's easier to just go back and edit, and then you don't have to shift select anything. You can just manually select all of these edges. Because sometimes when you shift selecting, then you select something wrong, or you accidentally unselect all your things, and this way it's just a lot easier. Just select all of those, done. And then it's not really necessary, but I think while I'm here, I think I'm just going to add that same fillet to these corners. No specific reason, but I think because this is going to be something that I'm going to fold up and take with me, I don't want any sharp corners sticking out. So I'm just going to fillet to there, and now we have a nice looking chair. Now looking at this, I'm actually wondering if the width of these legs should not maybe be a little bit more. So that's the nice thing. Again, we can jump back to the sketch over here, insert a breakpoint, and obviously the sketch is hidden, but if you select it in the history tree, it'll bring it up again. If you click off, it just disappears. So you can either go back and just unhide it, or keep it hidden and just click on the sketch over here. So I'm just going to take this and say seat diameter divide by 2, say plus 20, and see what that looks like. Just remove this breakpoint here, and I think I could actually go a little bit wider on that. So you don't even have to insert a breakpoint. You can just click on that and go and change this anytime. So maybe I want to add, say, 40. And there we go. That immediately looks a whole lot better. Okay, so now looking at this, I've realized that I don't really like how this looks, because the idea was that I wanted to cut slots in both of these edges so that when I pack it flat, that I can carry it with that slot. I want the slots in this orientation, and now obviously there are mortise and tenons over there. So I would actually want, as an example, to have this rotated 45 degrees. I actually want a chair like that, so that the handle slots can be in here. So just give me a moment to think about how I'm going to do that. So I'm just going to rotate that back, and then I'm going to see, maybe I can go back to that sketch and change it. So let's select that sketch, normal to sketch, select it, and obviously, luckily, I didn't constrain it horizontal or vertical. So what I can do is just undo that. I can create a guide line over here, just stretch it out somewhere there, and I can constrain that vertically and just stretch that out a little bit further. And then what I can do is just grab this, rotate it, and snap it to there. And just like that, everything is fixed just the way I want it and updated, and tenons are cut where I wanted them. So that's just an example of how powerful this history tree is. So next we're going to cut in these slots that we want for the handles. Okay, I just realized that I haven't saved anything. So before we do anything, I'm just going to go over here and I'm going to call it basic hockey stool. Okay, so in order to create the slots over here, I'm going to create a sketch on the top face over here. And what I think I'm going to do is just project this line and this line into the sketch. And then what I can do is just put a guide from that center point to that center point. Now, an important thing to remember that I didn't mention before is that if you are projecting elements of other geometry into your sketch, it is important to go over here and enable this linked sketch, because if you don't enable that and you change, for example, the diameter of the seat and it gets bigger, the projection that you added in is going to stay where it was. It's not going to follow the actual geometry. In this case, you can see that when the lines are projected in purple, that means that they are linked. So if you, for example, uncheck that and project this line, then you'll see it comes in as blue. So just something to note over there. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to select the rectangle tool, just take the construction lines off, I'm going to just create a rectangle over here. Crap. Looks like Shaper 3D just crashed. That doesn't happen too often, but when it does, I'm pretty happy to find that when I go back into Shaper 3D, all of my stuff is usually still there, because all of this stuff updates to the cloud and it updates pretty regularly. So, oh my goodness, now it won't even launch anymore. Well, that's weird. That is interesting. See if I can open up another project here. That works. That works. That's very weird. Let's see if this works now. Oh my goodness. Okay, just give me a second here to try and figure out what's going on. Okay, still haven't managed to get this sorted out. I've closed the program a couple of times. I've duplicated the project and tried to open the duplicated project, and it's still not working. The last idea I have, I thought I'd show you what I'm going to try. As you can see, there's an option here that says show versions. So Shaper 3D will periodically save different versions of your file. So this is the one that I just created. It's 11 o'clock at night. And this was the last save that I did this afternoon. So if I select that and restore this as my latest project, it's waiting for download. Let's have a look. Luckily I haven't missed too much. Let's see. Okay, so now it's opened. So I'm going to try and do the exact same steps that I just did and see if the system crashes again. Okay, now I'm almost too scared to create the rectangle on there again, so I think what I'm going to try is I'm just going to create the rectangle here. Oh, you must be shitting me. Oh, it is super weird. That doesn't bode well for my very first Shaper 3D tutorial. After 6 months of using Shaper 3D, this has never happened before. Go figure. Okay, we're back. I've got no idea how I managed to fix that. I was actually busy recording a video for the support team because I was about to issue a support ticket, and while I was trying to recreate the problem, somehow it worked. So obviously Murphy's Law, as I was trying to show support what was wrong, the problem just went away. I did the same exact thing 4 or 5 times and it crashed every time. Now that I'm recording a video for support, it seems to work. So I've done all the exact same steps again. As you can see, it works. So I'm going to do that. I think what I'm going to do also is create another construction line from there to that midpoint, because I'm going to mirror this across. Save me the effort of doing it twice. Just escape. I'm going to select this and make them parallel. Okay, now I've taken a measurement of my hand here. At the base of my fingers it's roughly 85 millimeters. My whole hand is roughly 100 millimeters. Probably never going to stick my whole hand in there, but let's make width of this 100 millimeters and then make thickness of the cutout. My fingers are roughly 20 millimeters, so I'm going to make it just a little bit bigger. Let's actually just make it 30 millimeters. 30. Let's just select it first. 30. And now the only thing left to constrain is the distance from the edge. So I'm going to select that edge, and I'm going to make it, let's make it 35 from the edge. I think let's make it less, let's make it 30. Come on. Okay, this is really starting to bug me. I've just restored again to the previous version. See where we're at. Okay, it's working now. Okay, so what I'm going to do is just select all of these and I'm going to mirror them across there and select those and extrude them through distance of material thickness, and thankfully now that's working. Okay, let's hope we don't run into any more problems. Okay, so I'm going to select all of these edges over here so that I can fillet them. fillet those. I know that the width of this cutout is 30, so I'm going to fillet it up to 15, and that should give me nice round cutouts. Okay, something that I just realized while I was trying to fix this problem. If I go back here in the settings, I found that there was a spot where I can enable display clicks and display keyboard presses for tutorial mode, which is pretty helpful, I think. So I'm going to put that on, select there. Okay, now you can see, okay, there you can see it at the bottom, all my keyboard presses. That's pretty cool. Okay, so now that we have the basic chair design, the next thing I want to do is to take all of these parts and line them up in the orientation that I want them to be when I stack this thing together and strap it up into one nice neat bundle to carry around. How am I going to do that? So I think let's go into, this is the front view. So what I'm going to do is double click this one. I'm going to rotate this by 90 degrees, and then I'm going to select this one, and I'm going to rotate this by 90 degrees, and then I'm also going to rotate this to 45 degrees, and then I want to be able to move this down here. So basically when everything is stacked up, I want this handle to stick out at the bottom, so I'm going to be carrying it upside down like this. So I'll probably have this seat portion in the middle, and then these two pieces on the outside, sandwiching it. And then basically I want some cutouts on either side over here, through which I can put like a strap or a tie down, which I can use to strap this whole thing together into one neat little bundle. So as I have them lined up over here, I'm going to create a sketch on this face over here, and let's hope we don't get any more crashes. I'm going to create another construction line in the middle here, and I'm going to go and create a rectangle over here. Okay, so let's set the strap. Probably going to be using I think the strap is probably going to be about 25 millimeters wide. So let's make this 25. Oh, come on. 25, and I'll probably, the strap is pretty thin, but I'm probably going to be using a 6mm router bit to cut this out, so I may as well go ahead and make the width of this slot 6mm, and I'm going to create a measurement from there to there. Let's make that say 100. That can work, and then I'm going to create a measurement from there to there. At the moment that's 160. I think I want it a little bit lower down, so let's make that maybe 180. That looks good, nice and centered. And then I'm going to select that and mirror it through there. Good. And then I'm going to select these, and I'm going to cut them through. Thickness of material, thickness. Okay, as you can see, there they are cut out. So what I can do, I don't want to delete these movements, because if I delete them, then the sketch that I created and the cutout I've created are going to disappear as well. So what I'm going to do is, I don't know if this is going to work, but I'm going to suppress that movement, and I'm going to suppress that movement, suppress that movement. Okay, see, that is a problem now. So because I've suppressed those movements, it's not registering the cutout through the legs, and also I'm not too fond of where these cutouts are landing in the top. I'd like to have them in the center. I think that's going to look better. So let's suppress this, unsuppress this, unsuppress this, and go back to that sketch. And then I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to just unlink this measurement so it can move around again. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to select that point to this line, and I'm going to make this seat diameter divided by 2. Okay, unable to constrain that. Let's see why. Okay, it can move that way. Okay, there's still something holding it. Yeah, let's take that off. Oh, okay. So from there to there was, I think we made that 100. So let's go from the center point to there. I'm going to make that seat diameter divided by 2. Okay, so I like that a little bit better. Okay, just give me a moment. Now I've got to figure out how I can get these parts back in their normal orientation without messing up that cutout. So I can't put the sketch before the movement because then the references that I used have disappeared. Okay, I don't think I have much of a choice here. I think I'm just going to have to create those movements again in reverse to put it back the way it was, which is okay. It's not the end of the world. There's only 3 parts here. So I'm going to select. Okay, so I'm not sure if there was any easier way to do what I just did there. If there's anyone watching this video who is more well versed in Shaper 3D, it would be very nice if you could share that in the description below. That would be very helpful. But I think the way I did it is going to work for my purposes here. So the only thing I want to do now is just create a couple of fillets over here. Little helpful tip that I can give you. Sometimes you'll notice that if you're busy rotating around the view over here and you manage to get stuck inside your object and you're finding it difficult to get out, the easy way to reset your view is just to hit Control-1 on your keyboard, and that will, recenter and realign your whole project. Took me a while to figure that out, but it's pretty helpful. I use it very often. Okay, done. Okay, that's the basic modeling of the stool done. So the only thing I want to add now is some kind of locking mechanism that I can use to lock the top to the legs once it is in its upright position. Because as I mentioned before, I don't want to be picking the chair up and moving it around and having it fall apart. I have a couple ideas for how I want to do that, but right now it's 12 o'clock at night. I'm going to go get some sleep and I'll carry on with this tomorrow. So see you then. Okay, so it's a new day and I'm not going to lie, I'm a little bit nervous to continue modeling this, seeing as I had all those crashes last night, but let's get going. So as I mentioned, I want to have some kind of locking mechanism locking this top onto the legs. So initially the idea was to add just generic latches. Downstairs in my workshop I have a couple of latches lying around, small ones, that I wanted to kind of modify to work in this situation. As you can see, now these latches are obviously more designed to latch something together that's like 180 degrees and not like a 90-degree corner, which is what I need. But while trying to figure out the best way to use these latches, I decided, why don't I just try and design something unique? I do have a 3D printer, so I may as well design something that I can 3D print, which is going to be custom and purpose built for my specific needs. So I'm just going to jump onto the iPad here and give you a rough illustration of what my idea is. Okay, so here's my basic idea. If this is the basic design of the side, this is where one of those tenons is. So the idea is basically to have some kind of 3D printed part that goes in like this, that I can screw in there. Now I want this to be recessed into the wood, so if you look at it from, say, a side view, it's going to be basically recessed into this part, but it's going to come out a little bit further over there and have a feature like this, which will obviously lock into the seat when it goes in from the top. So if you have a look at what the seat looks like from the top, this is where the mortise piece is. So I'm just going to basically extend this cut out a little bit, but not all the way through obviously, and then I'll 3D print a part that can screw into there, which is also going to be recessed into the material, so that when this little feature goes in there, it's going to clip in, and that should keep it in place. So if I want to take it out, then I'll just use my thumb or something to press it in here, and I'll be able to lift the top off. That's the basic idea. So let's jump back to Shaper 3D and see how we're going to design this. Okay, so let's jump in here. See, we want to use maybe the front view. I'm going to create a sketch on this plane over here, and then I don't think I need to project any geometry in here. I am going to strike a center line down the middle here. Okay, there's no features here, and then I can snap my center line to, so maybe from there to there should be good. This line is obviously just to mirror across whatever I do on this side. So let's put this construction off there. I'm going to start with a rectangle, but I want a diagonal rectangle, so I'm going to select that down like that, and then I think I'm going to just create another rectangle over here like this. Okay, I also don't want this part to be huge. Let's just select this, make this horizontal, make this horizontal, but this I want to be tangent to that. I think I'm going to just create another construction line down here, and I'm going to make that horizontal. Okay, this is just basically to line this up, so if I move this to that, it's going to snap in place. And I want to have the width of this. Let's make this 22. I think actually 20 should be fine over there. 20. And then I also want this to be in the center. Let's make this 50 millimeters. And the distance from there to there is currently 15. So I think I'm going to want to make this 15 as well. This feels a little bit long, so I think I'm going to make that, say, 50. Okay, looking at this, I think this might be better at 15 as well. See, I don't need this part to be extremely strong because there's not going to be any loads applied to it. Okay, so at the moment this thing ends at the bottom of the seat. Obviously I don't want it to end there, so I'm going to just draw out an extra piece here. Okay, so obviously let's just make that horizontal. So now I've got to decide how tall I want this piece to be. I think 12 is a good length over there. So the reason I'm creating this all in different parts and not just drawing it out with the line tool is because I want to extrude these features into this part first, so I can create the pockets where this bracket is going to sit into. And I want these cutouts to be at different depths. This cutout is going to be the thickness of the actual part that's going in here so that it can fit flush, and then this one is going to be a little bit deeper because this part obviously needs to bend in to allow that top to drop into place. So I'm just going to, okay, we haven't named the top yet, so I'm just going to name that seat, and then I'm going to hide the seat. Now this feels a little bit tall because obviously, I was looking at the top of the seat there, but top of this actual cutout is a little bit shorter. So I think I'm just going to change this length 12 to, let's say, 10. I think that should be enough. So I also don't want this part to blow out once it's cutting on the CNC. So I think I might make that even smaller. Let's make it 8. Okay, that's good. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this out first. I'm going to cut this out 2 millimeters. I haven't decided what thickness I want to use for the bracket. 2 millimeters might be a little bit thin, but I also don't want it to be too thick because then this part is going to be too stiff and it's going to be difficult to bend that in. I think let's make it 2.5. 2.5 seems okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create this 2.5 as a variable and create that length, and I'm going to call that block thickness. So and if I want to change that to 3 later, then I can do that too. Somehow that didn't work. Obviously it didn't work because I changed the name of that variable 3. So let's just go to that extrusion again, select that and say block thickness Okay, why is that not working? It's supposed to subtract. Spell this right first. Okay, it's because it went the wrong way. Just cut it in that way. Call it block thickness. So if I change it now to say 5, updates. Okay, that's good. So now for this part, these two pieces can actually be the same. I'm going to draw that. So the material thickness over here is 18 mil. I think I'm going to do it half of the material thickness. Material thickness divided by 2. I can always go and change this later. Just have to make sure that there is enough space for this part to bend in to make way for the top to come in there. Okay, so obviously I've forgotten now to create the other side, but I can easily go back and do that. If I select that sketch, normal to sketch, I can select all of these features and mirror them around there. And we have that, so now I just have to update that extrusion. This one, edit, I want to do that part as well. And this one, edit, to add those two. Done. Okay, so now that we have the cutouts, we can go and create the actual bracket itself. So I'm going to unhide that sketch quickly, and we're going to create another extrusion here. So there, there, and there, there, and there. So I'm going to extrude this in to block thickness. Okay. We want to make sure that it doesn't join to that body, so new body is good. So that means this, it's the sketch is in the way, so I can't select it. So if I just hide that sketch, you'll see that this is a separate part now. Okay, let's bring back that sketch. So now we want to create the feature that's actually going to lock it. So that's going to be this little piece over here. And I'm going to bring this out. 5 millimeters. I think 5 millimeters should be enough. I think that'll work. So then we can just select this top edge over here and we can chamfer it in like this. 5 millimeters as well should be good. So basically the top is going to come in, push this out of the way and lock in place. Okay, so now obviously when 3D printing you always have to add a little bit of clearance. So I'm going to quickly create a variable here for clearance. Call it clearance, and we're going to make the clearance, let's say 0.3 millimeters. Now I want to select this. I'm going to just make these lock underscore 1, and this one lock underscore 2. So I just want to hide these quickly, and then I'm going to go and select, after hiding the sketch, these faces. And I'm going to offset all of them by that variable which I just created, which is clearance. This one, this one, this one. Okay, so now if I offset these, I can just select that variable clearance. Okay, so now when I bring back the locks, should technically have a little bit of clearance going all the way around, which is exactly what we're looking for. Now obviously there's no way to attach these, so I still need to add holes over here for screws to go in, which I haven't done yet. So I'm going to go back to that sketch. It shouldn't be too hard to create. So I'm going to create another construction line. Let's just go normal to sketch quickly. From there to there. And I'm going to add some circles on this line. I think let's make them 4 millimeters. I think that should be good. 4 millimeters. And then I know that this bracket is 15 millimeters tall, so if I want these to be the same distance from the edge as it is over there, I need to select this and make this a 7.5. Same on this side, 7.5. Now I can just select those features and mirror them across as well. Nice and easy. So now all I need to do is go back to that extrusion, the original one, the extrusion where I extruded the part, which is this one, and then I can just edit it, and let's just clear this and then bring that sketch back again quickly and select that and that and that. Done. And as you can see, that works. Okay, I want to add a bit of a round over to these corners as well, so I'm going to just select that. Okay, when you're doing this, you have to also bear in mind the router bit that you're going to be using. As I mentioned, I'm going to be using a 6mm bit, so when that 6mm bit comes around here to cut this corner, I can't go anything under 6mm diameter here. So 6mm diameter radius is 3mm, so I think a 4mm should be good over here. So I'm just going to confirm that and then just go back to the fillet feature and just add all of the other edges that I want to have filleted. Obviously, it's debatable whether it would have been easier to just add these radiuses in my sketch, which is obviously also an option. I won't really know if that would have been quicker unless I actually tried it, but this is the way I've decided to do it, so it's just how it is. Okay, it's looking good, so I just want to make this look a little nicer. I'm going to select this top edge over here, round that over a little bit more, maybe 2.5, and then just do the same at the bottom as well. I don't want such an abrupt edge over there, so I'm going to round this over to maybe 2. That looks good. Let me just hide one of these legs. So I may want to do the same over here. Okay, in the case of this, I don't want to add another feature, so I'm just going to go back to that second last fillet I created and just add those lines like that. Done. Oh, for some reason this one's disappeared now. Edit. That one. Okay, I think that's good. Let's bring back that leg. Okay, now all that's left to do is to create the recess and the bracket that's going to go in the bottom of the seat, which is going to interact with this latch over here. So let's bring back the seat. Okay, so bringing this top back, I realize I've made a bit of an oversight over here. If I just go to appearance and show hidden edges, you'll see what the problem is. So the bottom part of this lock mechanism is now in line with the bottom of the seat, so which means for that to work, my latch is going to have to be above the surface. So if I want to recess it by the thickness of the lock, I want it to be like 3 millimeters, the same as this one, then I'm going to have to raise this up 3 millimeters as well. So yeah, I think this is probably where some people struggle with this. I think what most people will be tempted to do, people who've been using Shaper 3D for a while, would probably be inclined to just grab all these faces and move them up. But in order to keep nice clean history, the best idea is to go back to that sketch and make those changes there. Let me just find that sketch. I think it's this one. So now at the moment this is constrained where? Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go insert a breakpoint over here, and then I can have a better view without all of those changes that happen afterwards. Okay, so I think this coincident constraint is what's holding this in this position. So I think I'm going to delete that. That should allow me to be able to move this up. I want to be able to set a measurement from there to there. Let's see if I can do that. Select that. We know that block thickness is going to be 3 millimeters. So I think I'm actually just going to use that variable to set that distance, so that if I change the thickness of those parts, then that distance will update as well. But now, once again, I feel like the cutout is a little bit close to the edge over here, so I think I'm going to reduce this to 6 millimeters. And hopefully that doesn't cause too many problems down the line. So let's just remove this breakpoint and see how that ends up. And thankfully it seems like everything is worked out, except that bottom radius that we created over there is a little bit messed up now, and that's this one over here. So if you open that, see, as you can see, the two references are missing. So I think if I can fix those, if you click on there, it'll show you which features are missing. So if you just click on them, then it'll clear them out, and then you can select new edges. That one, operation failed because it would be invalid. Okay, so obviously I can't add that round over there anymore, so I'm just going to delete that feature, and then let's go and edit this one. Okay, in this case I'm just going to edit that value. If you select that, change this to say 2 millimeter radius, and see if we can create that now. Okay, so it's not allowing me to create a radius there like I wanted to. It's looking a bit stupid. Okay, what I'm going to do, I'm going to keep this at 1 millimeter, but then I'm going to go back to the last one, this one, and I'm going to remove this edge and keep that sharp, or perhaps create another radius altogether. Done. See if this works. Okay, that seems to give me a better result. Let's make that 1 millimeter. Okay, it's not perfect, but I think that'll do. So now if we bring the seat back, we'll see that now we have clearance for that bracket to go in. So let's just hide those edges again and get started on that actual bracket. So let's create a sketch on bottom of the seat, and let's see, where do we have that feature. Click project, and then we can add these features in here. I think let's add this line over here, this line, and this line. Okay, so now I'm going to just quickly put a construction line in here, and I'm going to add a construction line over here to mirror. And then I'm just gonna constrain this one horizontally. I'll just grab another center point rectangle. Okay, so now in this case I also want two different depths of cutout. I want the cutout for this locking mechanism to be a little bit deeper, and then the cutout for where the screws are going to go and where it's going to be seated, thickness of the bracket again. So let's just create another center point rectangle inside that. Now this one, I want to have tangent with that one. Okay, we just got to constrain these horizontally, and this I can lock in place here, or I guess I can't. Let's just select that and make that tangent also. I want the width of this bracket to be, let's say, 20. Come on. Okay, got the same problem again. Let's try and revert back to the last save here. So did it save that sketch? No, that sketch is not saved, so I'm going to have to make all those changes again. Let's just see if that last change that I made is saved. Okay, I've still got my clearance over there. Okay, I'm not going to bore you with doing all that again. I'm going to create those changes quickly, try and get back to the same point again and carry on from there. Okay, so let's see where we're at right now. It's 8 o'clock in the evening now. It's officially been like 8 hours since I issued my support ticket, and I still haven't heard anything from Shaper 3D support staff. I've tried a whole bunch of things. I've uninstalled Shaper 3D and I've re-downloaded it through the official Microsoft store. I reinstalled the program and everything seems to be the same. I've restored even older versions of this file, working files, and made all the changes again, and I still get the crash at pretty much the same place. So I've got one or two more tricks up my sleeve. The last thing I'm going to try now is I'm going to take this file, I'm going to export it. Export here, I'm going to export it as a Shaper 3D file to my actual hard drive, as all of these files are saved in the cloud. I'm also going to export it as a 3MF file, a Parasolid file, and I'm going to create a new file on Shaper 3D and try and import these files and see if I can get this finished that way. Now, importing the Shaper 3D file is going to be the only way that I can keep my whole history tree. The 3MF file, Parasolid files, or step files, any of those, if I bring those in, it's just going to come in as a model, and hopefully I'll be able to make changes to that. Barring that, the only other thing that I can try is perhaps merging down my entire history tree and see if I can get the project finished like that. So let's jump in and see how that goes. Let's first try the Shaper 3D file. Let's bring that in. There we go. As you can see, it brings it in with all of my variables as well as my whole history tree. So I'm going to save this as hockey stool last resort. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and try and make those same changes again. You're probably sick and tired of seeing this by now, but let's go for it. Project. So let's see how far we get this time. Words can't even explain how I'm feeling right now. I can't express the amount of restraint I have to exercise right now to not just grab my entire PC and throw it out the bloody window. And each bloody time I've got to resize this damn window, which is just as irritating. Okay, so I may have gotten past the spot where it keeps on crashing. The only thing I did differently is I didn't use the project to project those lines through as I did before. So if you'll see, show hidden edges, as you can see, these lines, they're still here, but I didn't use the project to bring them through. Now, the problem is I cannot lock these lines to that geometry. Or see, even if I snap it there, it's not stuck. This one either. To just get past this problem, I think I'm just going to keep it as it is. Maybe if I try to, you see, I can't select that line unless it's projected through. If I select the line, then it goes out of sketch mode. So I'm just going to have to live with the fact that the sketch is not going to be fully constrained. I can at least still snap it there. Changes are just not going to carry through. If I make changes to other parts like the latch mechanism, that's not going to carry through to this part. But okay, so this one I initially made 20, but that seemed a bit too wide, because if I'm going to have another one on this side, it's going to almost cut into that handle piece there. So I think 15 should be okay. In fact, come to think of it, I think 10 might even be okay as well. So then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create another line over here from there to there. Reason being, obviously I want to cut this pocket out a little bit deeper, because that's where that latch is going to go into, and these edges over here are only going to be cut out to 3 millimeters. Come to think of it, I don't really think that's necessary. I think I can just remove that line and I can just have this entire thing be cut a little bit deeper. So this one over here, width, I think I'm going to have at 50. So most of this thing is constrained, except now obviously for these lines over here. So once again, I'm just going to select this geometry and mirror it over to this side. And now hopefully I'll be able to create these features. These spots over here, I want to extrude to lock thickness, and that means that it should be in line with that latch over there, which is good. What I'm doing now is just creating the pocket, and then I'll create the actual plate that's going to go in there. So this take a little bit further to around about there, so that it can clear that piece over there. Right now you see it cut through there, but that's not a problem. I'm going to fix that now. So I think I'll call this material thickness -5. See if that works. Oh my goodness. Something just happened here. Where on earth did that go? Let's have a look. See, extrusion. Extruded -24 millimeters. Okay. So I'm going to say +5 because it's going in a different direction. +5. So that's good. So I'm just going to select this. And right now it's set to subtract, and you see it's subtracting from 2 bodies. I wanted to subtract from this latch, so I'll just select that, bring it back. And obviously I can see that this cutout is going a bit deeper than it needs to, so I'm just going to change this to plus, say, 7. It still leaves enough clearance for that latch, so that shouldn't be a problem. Okay, so obviously I haven't done the same on the other side, so I'm just going to click there, edit, to do the same here. Done, edit, select that, done. Okay, for now I'm just going to hide these lines again so I can have a better view of what's going on here. So right now, seems that my cutout is good. So now all I've got to do is create the actual plate that's going to go in there. So to do that, it's just going to be a solid plate, that and that. Just select the same on the other side, that and that. I'm going to extrude that, lock thickness. So that should mean it'll sit flush, and we're going to create that as a new body. That's good. Okay, so obviously now I haven't added screw holes for that plate to go in there. So I'm just going to do that now. So let's just go back to this sketch. And that looks good. So I think I'm just going to name some of these things again. That's called lock 1, lock 2.
And let's call this, renames, lock, plate, lock underscore, plate underscore 1. And let's call this one lock underscore plate underscore 2.
And then I'm just going to hide those quickly because I want to go and add the offset here, just like we did for this piece. So I'm going to add offset there. Okay, so this offset 0.3 clearance. Okay, then we can bring back those, and then I would just like to round over these edges over here. So I think I'm just going to hide the legs here for a moment so I can have a better view of what's going on here. And let's hide those as well. And then I just want to select that. And create a nice round over here. Let's see what size we want to make that. Let's make it nice and big, 5 millimeters. I think that's good. So let's bring back the rest of our elements. Leg, lock, lock. Okay, so at long last, we're finally finished with the modeling portion of this project. Now there's just a couple of small changes I want to make before we carry on. I would like to chamfer these holes so when I turn screws in there they can sit nice and flush. So I'm just going to quickly select those and I'm going to chamfer them, so about 2 millimeters. Just going to use pretty small screws to go in there, so it should be fine. And then the last thing I want to change is I feel like these holes in the top seem a little bit big, so I'm going to go and find where I created that feature, which is over here, over there. So I hope I don't break something now. Select this, make this 25. Okay, we got that done. Now the only problem is this fillet that we put in over there does not match that curve anymore, so we're just going to change that from 15 to 12.5, and that fixes that. So just before we go ahead and lay all of this out and get it ready for export, I just want to check all of my variables and see if they're working as expected. A little bit nervous to try that, but let's go for it. Right now the stool height is at 450, so let's make that say 600. Okay, that seems to be working fine. That's great. Undo that. Material thickness, let's say we want to change that to 25. Okay, boom, that seems to work. Undo that. Let's go and check the seat diameter. Let's turn that to 350. And oh, as you can see, there is an issue here, and I suspect I know exactly what that issue is. You'll see here there's a little exclamation mark there, so that indicates that there are errors down the line in the history tree. So as you can see, this extrusion over here is the first thing that has an issue. So if I go ahead and look at that, let's say 2 faces and 2 missing references. So I can already tell now what the problem is. The problem was that exact spot where we had the crash the whole time, because I wasn't able to project the geometry through for this locking mechanism here. Those lines did not move along with the model. So if we go to that sketch, we'll see over here there are those 2 lines that we weren't able to snap to here because I wasn't able to project those lines through. Now I know I should probably not do this, but I'm going to live on the wild side here and see if I can fix this, because my OCD is just not going to be able to rest if I don't. So instead of projecting these lines through, I think what I'm going to do is add some construction lines, snap those to here and to here. Then I'm going to make these horizontal, vertical. Okay, you see it still doesn't make any difference, because even though I've snapped them to these points over here, they haven't turned green, which means they're not locked in place. So as you can see, they're still moving around. So how else am I going to be able to fix this? I think let's snap it over here and just see, for an example, what the distance is between there and there. It's 17.5. So what I could do is undo these lines, and I can move this, and I can set that distance to 17.5. So that means it should be the right distance away from there. And then I can do the same with this line, and wish me luck here, so hope we don't crash again. 17.5, and it should have updated on the other side because I have got mirrors enabled there. If we go out of sketch mode, as you can see, it's 350 now, and it seems like it's worked. So we change that back to 300. That makes me very happy. So I don't understand exactly why I'm having this issue. You know, projecting geometry onto my sketches is something that I use a lot, and I think it's a very important feature of any CAD program. So if that's something that's going to be causing issues in the future, I'm really going to have issues carrying on with this program. So hopefully the guys at the support center are going to be able to figure out what the problem is and hopefully fix it. So for now, luckily everything seems to be working, and all that's left now is to lay these parts out. I'm sure there are many ways that we can do that, but I'm going to show you how I generally do it. So first things first is I'm going to create a construction plane here on the ground and click next, and I'm not going to offset it. I'm just going to leave it there, click done, and then I'm just going to move it out of the way to the back there. Let's start with the seat. I'm going to select the top face because when I cut this on the CNC, I want the bottom to be at the top so that I can cut all of those features out. So selecting the top face, I'm going to click align, and then I'm going to select that plane, and then I'm going to just rotate this 45 degrees and move it on just anywhere there. Click OK, and next one I'm going to take is, let's say this one. This is click align, select there, so rotate this 90, put it somewhere there, maybe there. Okay, and then this one I want to lay flat on this face because the features that I need to cut out are on this side. So over here I'll select this face, align to there, and I'm just going to rotate this 180 degrees and drop it in there, which is good. Click done. Okay, so these parts that are left over here are my 3D printed parts. This I want to lay flat on this edge for 3D printing, so I'm going to select that, align to here, just move that up here somewhere, done, select that, align to here, move that in here somewhere, just rotate that 180. Okay, it seems like they're flipped the wrong way around. So if you'll see there's a little icon over here, so you can just click that and it'll flip the part upright. Fortunately, you don't have to go back and redo this one. You can just go to that feature in the history tree, which is this one, select it, and then you can just hit that icon again and you'll be able to move that. So last two parts. Okay, so these don't have a, okay, they do have an up or down. We obviously want the chamfer for the screws to be at the top, so I'm going to align the bottom face to there. Just move that over there, see if that's the right way around. See, this one came in the wrong way around again. Just flip it, put it anywhere, and then I'm going to select that face finally to there. Just flip that because it's probably going to come in the wrong way as well. The nice part of this method is that if you want to move some of these parts around, you just go back to the history tree and you can just select any one of these and you can move them wherever you like. For example, here, say this one we want to rotate 90, stick it in there. This one, rotate 90 and stick it in there, and then I can just export those separately for 3D printing, and I can export these for CNC. Okay, so in order to export these things for CNC, the way I would usually go about it is I will create another construction plane, but this one I'm going to offset just an arbitrary amount like 300 in this case, and then I'm going to create a sketch on top of that face, and then what I do is I project these features through to this sketch. Being that projecting has been giving me so many issues, I really hope I don't have too many problems with this. Just before I do that, I don't want to move these parts around a bit. Let's just exit sketching again. Now, there are many ways to project these lines across. Some people will just select this entire object and then it'll come through. But I'll show you a little bit later when I bring these vectors into Illustrator, which is what I use to kind of get them ready for cutting on the CNC. If you select a whole object, it's going to automatically bring in these lines in multiples. So see, there's a line here and there's a line here, so it's going to probably bring in two lines. Like here's lines there. For each face, it's going to bring in a new line. That'll be a line, a line, a line. So this line could potentially come in as 4 or 5 lines, which is really annoying. I don't know how that works. Every single CAD package that I've used, I've had the same issues. And you'll also see when I bring these vectors into Illustrator, it doesn't bring it in as a solid object. Every single segment of the line is a single segment all on its own. And then I usually have to go and merge those together. But Illustrator has tools to make that a little bit easier, so it's not too much of a problem. So let's just go back to the sketch. So usually I'll just select project and I'll select the top face. I selected that face and that face, that face. Now you can see the features that it's bringing through. So some of these features are fine, but as you can see, if you look at, I don't know if you can see that on screen, but over here it's only bringing in the basic outline of this shape. That step and that step, it's not bringing in separately. So I have to go and select those. This part over here I see unfortunately is turned around. So I'm going to have to flip that first. So let's just go out of here for a second. Cancel. And I'm going to go to this first one and just flip that around. Okay, that's good. So now I'm going to have to do this again. Project this face, and this face. So now you'll see that this is also just going to come through as one shape. So these steps are not going to be in there. So what I'll usually do is just select those lines individually, like that, like that, like that. Actually, let's unselect that and select this whole edge, and then that one. And I'll do the same here. That edge, that edge, and that edge. I just want to make sure that I have all the lines that I need. And then over here, I'm going to select that one, and that one, and that one, and this one, and this one, and this one. And if I click OK, that will be my sketch. So what I can do, just to clean some of this up, I'm just going to filter bodies over here, and then I'm going to put all of these inside a folder and call this Stool. That way I can hide the entire stool and just see my sketch. So that gives me all the lines that I need. Obviously, if I show this again, I'm going to have to go and make notes of the depths of each of these cutouts, so that when it comes time to set the toolpaths, then I know what to do. Okay, so in order to export these vectors, I'm just going to hide this tool. I'm going to go into top view, which I don't think is actually necessary. I'm going to click share, export, and then I'm going to export sketch, and then I'm going to select DFX from sketch. Now I've tried DWG and SVG in both Shaper 3D as well as Fusion 360, and every single time I bring DFX files, DWG or SVG files, or even EPS in other programs, when I bring them into Illustrator, they always come in as separate segments, which is really annoying. But you'll see that very soon. So I'm going to export this DXF as hockey stool layout, save. And while we're here, I'm just going to go ahead and bring back the stool. Okay, I'm just going to hide the sketch now, and what I'm going to do is select these elements, and I'm going to go into isolation mode, and I'm going to export these so long for 3D printing. So I'm going to export this for 3D print, and I'm going to export it as an STL, which is what I usually use. And I'm going to call this hockey stool lock. Save. Here we go out of isolation mode and just bring everything back. I like to save all of my models with everything visible, so that when I open it up, I can see everything nicely at a glance. So the nice thing over here is that if you go ahead and make changes once again to, say, the seat height, stool height to 500, you'll see that all of these parts updated. If we go and change this to 350, see all of that is updated too. Okay, some of these things have overlapped now because of how we laid them out, but it's easy enough to move those around again afterwards. So just let me undo that, undo that. This is what I would call a useful file. So any changes I want to make in the future, like for example, if I go and measure my material now and I find that actually this material is now 18 millimeters and not 19 millimeters, which means that my tenons are not going to fit into my mortises, then I can just come here, change this to 18 and re-export all of my files, and everything is right with the world. So next I'll see you in Illustrator and take it from there. Okay, so here we are in Illustrator. I'm just going to create a new file here. I think I'm just going to create a standard plywood sheet size, which in my country is 2.4 meters by 1.2 meters. Just going to create that. Okay, then I'm just going to go and find that DFX file. So I'm going to drag that in here. Usually when you bring in a DFX, it's going to open it in a new window anyway. So original size, it should all be good. So open that, and then I'll just grab that over there. Usually I don't like to save the DFX file, because if you import a DFX file, it does weird things to Illustrator. As you'll see over here, suddenly all of my color swatches disappear and stuff like that. So usually I'll just copy this out of the DFX file, copy it into my new file, and then just save this to my PC. So long, save as, and then I'm going to save this to the same place, CNC hockey stool, and I'm going to call this hockey stool layout. So now I'm going to show you what I mean by all of these parts coming in separately. So at the moment now it looks like everything is one part, but that's just because when it brings it in, it's all grouped. So if you ungroup everything, you'll see that each one of these lines is a separate segment, which is super annoying. And this is the case with every single DFX that I bring into Illustrator. Undo, 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 undo. So what I usually have to do is I have to merge all of these objects into one solid object. So as I said, Illustrator has tools that make that a little bit easier. Now some of these parts are really easy to do. So like this one, I can just make sure that I select all of these parts. I'll just make sure that one's also selected. Okay, unfortunately I've selected some of these parts too. So I'm just going to deselect these. Okay, and then if you hit Shift M, you'll open the Pathfinder tool, or I think it's called Shape Builder tool. So all you have to do is click on it, and that creates a solid object. So now even if you go into direct selection, you can see that it is in fact all one solid piece, which is good. So with something like this, it's easy, as I said, but some of the other ones, it's going to be a little bit more complex. So you have to think of this from a CNC perspective. So the basic outline is fine, that's just a profile. But these parts over here are going to be a little bit more complicated. See, this is going to be one depth, this is going to be one depth. So I need to have those as separate closed objects. So there's always a little bit of editing that I need to do. So what I'll do in this case is I'm going to select these parts. Now Illustrator finally has brought a feature in where you can select objects that are fully inside your cursor. If you start clicking and dragging and you hit E, you'll see that little icon appear. So you can select only these items, which is good, because usually if you select that way, it's going to select whatever the line touches, which means that it includes those items as well, which is not what we want here. So in the design, when I filleted this edge, I didn't really want it to look this way. I wanted it to go straight across, which is more like what I want. So what I'm going to do is select this, Shift M for the shape builder, and I'm going to create that as one object. Just hit V to drop that tool. So there you can see that's one object, and then I'm going to actually just delete this line, and I'm going to draw a new line from there to there. It's joined by the drawing tools, must be either in the same group. Okay, that's fine. Just drop that tool, and then I'm going to select this, make sure I've got everything I need, and Shift M, make that one part as well. Then I'm going to have to do the same here quickly. Okay, so now we need to do the rest of this object. So I'm just going to move this part away so that it's out of the way, so I don't accidentally select some of that. I'm going to select all of this, but I don't want to select these items. So I'm going to unselect that, and that, and that, and that, and hit Shift M, and I'm going to merge that. So now this is an object on its own, which is good, and this is an object on its own. So this I'm actually going to overlap a bit, because this is going to be, is this the deeper pocket? Okay, this is actually the deeper pocket, so I'm just going to line that up there, and this I'm going to line up here. So I might have some issues here because when the router bit comes in to cut here, it's going to leave a radius like that. So I don't know if that's going to interfere with the mechanism that's supposed to be in there, but if it does, I'll just use a chisel and chop that out quickly. It shouldn't be too much of a problem. So now I'm just going to group these, Control G. So this is an object on its own. Move these out the way. Oh my goodness, everything is lagging tonight. I don't know what's going on. And then do the same with this one. So over here it's only this feature and this one that requires special treatment. So this is going to be the deeper pocket. This is going to be 3 millimeters, 3 millimeters, and this is going to be the depth of this tenon that's supposed to go in there, which is cool. So I think what I'm going to do here is I'm going to select all of that and all of that, and if I hit Shift M, I can click there, click there, click there, click there, and click there, click there, click there, click there. And if all goes well, these should be separate objects, which they're not. I see all of these are merged together somehow too. Okay, but I see over here, it gives me the option to ungroup, so it could be that they just group together. So let's ungroup that, ungroup that. Okay, now so all of these objects are separate, which is what we want, because these are different layers. Now actually this over here and this over here is one layer, so ideally I would cut this as one depth, 3 millimeters, and then cut this separately. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to move this out of the way here, grab this and direct select these, and I'm going to bring this over, snap it to there, and I'm going to merge these together. Hit V to drop the tool. Okay, before I do that, I just want to make sure that I line this up in the right place again. So I'm just going to snap that to there. I'm going to select that and merge those together. Just make sure that worked, which it didn't, obviously. Okay, so I'm just going to grab this again, select these two and just a bit over so it overlaps, and bring this back again, and then select these and merge them together. Okay, so now I have 3 separate items, which are 3 separate depths, which is what we want for cutting on the CNC. Now you're probably looking at this and thinking this is crazy and this is a stupid amount of work, but honestly, from all of the work that I've done, this seems to be the best workflow that I've found so far. Now I know if you're using something like Fusion 360, Fusion 360 does have CAM features built in, so you can take your model directly in Fusion 360 and you can create the toolpaths without any of this hassle. Now, fortunately or unfortunately, I've never used the CAM features in Fusion 360 since the beginning when I got my CNC machine. I've been using Vectrix VCarve Pro for all of my toolpath creation, and I really like the program, so that's my workflow and I'm sticking to it. So over here, I'm just gonna do all the same stuff again. Okay, so now I'm going to select all the rest of this, and I'm going to deselect this and deselect this. Shift M and drop the tool. So that's good. Just going to merge all of this together, group, and finally we are ready to get all of this cut on the CNC. So I'm just going to line it up somewhat. Okay, so to export this, all I'm going to do, okay, before I do that, I'm going to save. And then I'm going to select all of this, right click and export selection, and I'm going to call this Stool layout, and I'm going to export this as a PDF because that's what I usually import into VCarve Pro, and that seems to work fine for me. So it's saving in the right place, and this time it's a PDF. Select folder, export asset. So now you'll see my folder over here. I've got a hockey stool layout DFX, I've got a hockey stool layout Illustrator, and then I've got stool layout PDF as well. So for every project I have all of these. So sometimes when I need to make changes, if it's something small, I can just go and change it in my Illustrator file and export a new PDF. Sometimes the changes are larger, then I need to go back to Shaper 3D, make changes, export the DFX again, bring it into Illustrator, do all this stuff that I just did, and then export to PDF. So It's a bit of a schlep, but it's been working for me for the last, say, about 2 years. So before I jump into VCarve Pro, I'm just going to quickly restart my computer, and hopefully my computer will be running a little bit better. Okay, so the computer that I usually use for creating my toolpaths is actually down in the workshop. So I'm using this program called AnyDesk, hashtag not sponsored, to remotely connect to my computer downstairs in the workshop. And that way I can create my toolpaths from here. So if I connect to it, we can have access to that computer, and I can also transfer files between my computer and that computer through AnyDesk, which is pretty useful. Now I do have VCarve Pro installed on this PC as well, as you can see here, but because I generally only use the computer downstairs, all my settings and things are nice and dialed in there, so it's just easier for me to do it that way. So if I open VCarve Pro, I'm going to open up a new file. Now I haven't gone to look at what scraps of material I have left over in order to cut this, so I'm just going to put in some random size here. So let's say 1 meter by 1 meter and keep it at 19 millimeters, and I'm going to make the Z0 position machine bed, and my XY datum is in the bottom left corner. At the moment, obviously the files are not on this computer, so if I click over here, I can browse files. This is the remote device. This is the computer I'm working on at the moment. So if I go back to CNC, hockey stool, there is the layout that I need. So I'm just going to go to my CNC files on the remote computer, quickly create a folder, call this hockey stool, then I can transfer the files. So if I just select that stool, I can click upload, and there it is. So I go back to this main window and I can now import the files. So let's find them quickly. Hockey stand, stool, there it is, import, and there we go, we have the files. So I'm going to create the toolpaths now, and once I've done that, I'll go and locate whatever scraps I have to cut this on, and then I'll adjust the size. Then it won't be a problem. I just have to recalculate all the toolpaths. Okay, so now we're going to start with the shallowest pockets first, which is going to be this over here, and then these over here. I always like to go back to my Shaper 3D file, and then I can go and double check all of the depths that I need to cut. So if I select this line and this line, you can see that's a 3 millimeter pocket, and this line, that's also a 3 millimeter pocket. So that means this part, or at least this whole part, and this part are going to be a 3 mil pocket. So if I go back here, I can go and select those. So that, and that, and that, and that. Okay, so if I switch to toolpath commands, I'm going to create a pocket toolpath over here. I already have my 6 millimeter end mill set up there, so I'm going to make it a depth of 3 millimeters, which is good. I'm going to keep it on climb milling. I tend to get a better surface finish when I do climb milling. So let's just double check what settings we have here for this tool. Okay, so I have it set to 18,000 RPM, but actually this number that I put in here is fairly arbitrary. My machine controls the RPM from the DSP controller. So I usually have it set to the maximum speed, which is 18,000 RPM anyway. I have my cut set at a feed rate of 250 inches per minute, plunge rate of 39. I never changed that, that seems to be fine. And I have a step over of 4 millimeters. When you're working with a ball nose bit or something like that, you want to have a lot smaller step over. But with a flat end mill, I find that 4 millimeters works finer. Okay, that'll work. So we go down here, we can calculate that first toolpath. Okay, I'm not going to preview it right now. I'm going to go to the next one. So the next pocket that I need to cut is this and those. I'm going to unselect this. I'm going to select another pocketing toolpath. This one, let's go and double check what depth we want those to be. So there to there is 9.5 millimeters. If you can see that this pocket over here is 13 millimeters. I wonder if I might as well just go and cut this whole thing as one pocket. I think I am going to do that. Okay, Let's go back here. We select this, and then this, and this. So in order to be able to cut this as one pocket, I'm going to have to merge this and this together. So let me see if that's possible. Let me just go back to the design tab. If I select that, okay, that has worked. That's fine. So I'm going to do the same with this. Just merge those. Just double check that it's worked. And yes, it has. Okay, so I'll select that and select that and select that and that. And this I'm going to make 13 millimeters. Climb milling is fine. Okay, it's set in 3 passes. So let's have a look here. Goodness, it's cutting at a 4.3 millimeter depth for each pass. If I reduce the number of passes to 2 passes, it's going to cut 6.5 millimeters. And I know from cutting this plywood that usually that depth of cut is fine. So I'll do that in 2 passes. Let's calculate that toolpath. And then let's go back here. This depth for this mortise is going to be the same as these. So I think I'm just going to edit that toolpath and just add these onto there as well. So let's just double click this toolpath again. And then select these items too, recalculate the toolpath. Okay, that's good. And then all that's left is the pocket toolpaths. So I'll select that, that, and that, all of these, and all of these. And I'll go to profile toolpath, and this depth of cut I'm going to make 19 millimeters, which is the thickness of my material. Let's just edit these. I'm going to lower the number of passes there too. 6.3 should be perfectly fine. Keep it as climb milling, and I'm going to cut outside the line. So VCarve Pro is smart enough to know that if it cuts outside this line, any feature that's inside, it'll cut on the inside. So it sees that as the outside, if that makes any sense. For this I want to add some tabs because I don't want these parts moving around when they get cut free from the main piece of material. So if you just activate toolpaths, you can click edit toolpaths, then you can come and add tabs here wherever you like. You can also add tabs automatically, but I find it easier just to add them myself. So I'm just going to add a small tab over here and over here as well, because I don't want this part kicking loose when it's cut free. Over here I think I'm just going to create one there, and one there. Actually I'm going to put them on the top here, because it's going to be easier to sand down. There, one there, there, and there. So that should be good. Close. Let's calculate these toolpaths. Calculate. Okay, so that should be all of our toolpaths. So let's go and preview all of the toolpaths. Okay, so that looks good. So obviously you can see the resolution on the preview is pretty low, so it's not that easy to see, but you'll see that round over there, which might be an issue because it's going to leave a bit of material over there. But as I said, you can just chop that off with a chisel. It should be fine. Over here everything looks good. Okay, one thing I see I've forgotten to do is add clearance over here, because obviously this part needs to fit into that part, and as it is at the moment it's going to have a round over here, so there's going to be interference there. One of the reasons I like to do this step in VCarve Pro is because it is very simple to do. If you click on fillet over here, there's a couple of different types of fillets you can make. You can make a normal fillet, which is not what we want, or a dog bone fillet and T-bone fillet. Depending on the situation, I'll use different ones here. So I just set my tool radius here, which is 3, because my tool is a 6mm diameter. And I think I'm going to select dog bone for these. Over here I'm going to need some of these dog bones to create clearance there, and I'm going to need the same here and here and here. So I'll create one there, one there, one there, there. Okay, actually I don't want it on that one. On there, okay, there and there. See, the only difference between a T-bone fillet is sometimes, like in this case, I could hide the fillet by adding it over here, so that when the piece gets fitted over here, the fillet is hidden inside the joint. But in this case, I'm not really worried about that. I'll just keep them all dog bones, that's fine. Just try and select the right one here. Yes, there and there. Okay, is there any other places that I need fillets? Okay, I might need fillets over here as well, because this is where the 3D printed lock is going to go in now. This is going to be printed at a 90 degree, and obviously there's going to be a round over inside these corners, so that means that the part's not going to fit in there. What I could do is just leave it like that and then just use a chisel to chop that out. Or I could go and make a T-bone running this way, because obviously if I make it running this way, there's going to be very little material there and it might break out. I could also create dog bone, which will give me a little bit more space. Let me first have a look see here. I want to see how much space this leaves over. So if I just do that, so this is only leaving 3 millimeters of space there, so that might still break out from there to there. Still not a lot, but every bit helps. So let's undo that, and I'm just going to create T-bones in there like that, and I think that should work fine. Over here it's not a problem because I already added the round over in the design, so that should be fine. So let's just close this, move back over here. I think let's recalculate all the toolpaths. Recalculate all, and let's have a look at the preview all toolpaths. So everything's fine. We have all our dog bones. So now all we need to do is export the toolpaths. What I always like to do is just check how long it's going to take. So in this case, total machining time was super short, 4 minutes, 5 minutes. So let's go to save toolpaths. All of these are the same tool, so I don't have to do any tool changes, so I can save this to one toolpath. Click save, and I'm going to call it STO. Every time I create toolpaths, I have to make the names extremely short, because on the DSP controller it only has 6 characters to show, so I sort of do just like an abbreviation of what it is that I'm going to be putting on there, because otherwise it's hard to find the files, especially if I have multiple files with similar names. I can only see the first 6 characters. So let's save that toolpath, and that's it. All we need to do now is drop those files on a memory stick, and we can put them on the DSP and get started. Okay, so these are the only 2 pieces of shutterboard that I have left, so I had to space them out fairly creatively. The width of the actual leg part is 377 millimeters wide, and this board is 380 millimeters wide, so it's only just going to fit. But that means that the widest part of the leg is going to cut to about 1 millimeter from the edge, which means that it's going to cut it free from this board. So I've had to move around some of the tabs and have had to carefully measure where exactly those parts are, so that I don't get clamps anywhere where the toolpath is going to run. I've also used a couple more clamps than I generally would. For a piece like this, 4 clamps should be fine, but seeing as cutting outside of the board, I'm adding a couple of extra clamps just for safety. So the 2 leg pieces are going to be cut on this piece of material, and the seat is going to be cut on this one. So as you can see, not very nice looking material. This is construction grade plywood, but with sand it should be okay. And if need be in the future, if I want to make it out of something nicer, then at least the concept and the design is flushed out. It shouldn't be a problem. So let's get the machine up and running and cut the first piece. Okay, so I've already got my 6mm bit chucked up here because I've recently used it. So I know I don't have to set my Z height because it's already been set. Only thing I need to do is use this to make sure that the origin point is exactly on this corner. So let's just see where it is right now. Come down. So on the last job I had it a little bit away from the corner, so I'm just going to move it a little bit. So now I can zero my X and my Y position, and we should be good to go. But before we can start, I've just got to put on the dust extraction and the spindles water cooler. So let me do that. Okay, so all the parts are sanded and they're ready for a clear coat. I was going to stain these and make these look nice, but this video is already taking up a lot of your time and I apologize for that. Before I go ahead and do that, I just want to show you something quickly. When you're working with the CNC, obviously from time to time you're going to run into some issues, and this project was no different. Sometimes those issues will be really big and you might have to redo your whole project, and in some cases it might be a fairly small problem. In this case, the problem is not that big. Let me show you quickly. So you may remember that all the parts that we created for the locking mechanisms, we made 3mm thick, and we also made the cutouts where they were supposed to seat in 3mm thick as well. Now, as you can clearly see over here, these two pockets are not exactly the same. This one measures to 2mm and this one measures to 3.2mm. So the reason for that is twofold. The first is that because we cut this part and this part out of two separate pieces of plywood, the thickness of the plywood differs. This plywood is a little bit thicker, and the reason that has affected this cut is because I set my Z0 position to the machine bed and not to the top of the material. Now, that's generally how I work, because of the inconsistencies in the thickness of the material. If I use the top of the material as the Z0 and my material ends up being thicker than it's supposed to, then my cuts don't go all the way through. So generally I'll always use the bed of the machine as my Z0, and whatever issues I have as a result of that I can hopefully fix later. In this case, I have two options. Either I can reprint this part to be 2mm, which might be actually a good idea, because then I might get a little bit more flex in this locking arm. Over here I could just put a 0.5mm shim inside each of these pockets, maybe just cut some pieces of paper to stick in there, or I could reprint this to be 3.5mm. The issue with that might be that now, because this pocket is deeper, this locking mechanism might not be able to go deep enough in there to be able to latch into this lock. So if I do reprint this, I might have to create like a taper or a step so that I can be certain that this part will actually engage with this plate. But first things first is I'm just going to slap a clear coat on this, and then I'm going to first use the parts that I've already printed and see what issues there are, if any, and then I can go ahead and sort out that problem. So we're in the home stretch, guys. If you're still here, thank you very much for your patience, but hopefully it'll be worth it in the end. Okay, so everything's got a nice clear coat on it. Let me quickly go and grab those 3D prints and let's see how they fit. Okay, there we go. So let's check these first. Okay, these seem to fit nicely. You can see over here I've had to chisel off a tiny little bit more on these corners here, because I forgot that these brackets have got rounded corners on the inside. But as you can see, it's about 1mm proud, but actually I think I'm going to leave it like that, because at this thickness the springiness of this locking mechanism seems pretty good. So I'm not too worried that it's not flush, because when this is in the stored position it's not going to be rubbing against anything, so it's not too much of a problem. So I'm going to test it with this, and if there's any problems then we'll fix those later. As for these parts, see, they also sit pretty nicely and they're actually quite flush. Not sure about the bottom edge, if it's going to be at the right height to grab that latch. If not, I'll maybe just take a file and put a bit of a chamfer on here or file it down, but I think we'll be able to work with the parts that we have here. With this one specifically, because it's pretty close to this edge over here, I'm going to mark and pre-drill some holes in order to prevent the screws from breaking these shoulders out. so let's give it a test and see if it will actually clip in place. In here. You see it's not going all the way in. It is holding it up and it's standing at a bit of an angle now. It's pulling it down, so I might need to sand a little bit there, or maybe add spaces like I mentioned earlier. One thing that I am a little bit worried about is that because the layer lines over here are printed in this orientation, I'm worried that if there's too much pressure on here that this is going to break off. But as I said, there shouldn't be too much load on these, as I'm just going to be picking the chair up and moving it around, and I'm not going to be hanging anything off of it, so it should be okay. So I think I'm going to go for the spaces idea. So let me cut a couple of pieces of paper, stick them in there, and then we'll give it another test. Okay, so I eventually decided not to add shims in here because these I actually do want to sit fairly flush, because I don't want them to scratch the surface of these leg pieces when I sandwich them together. So I'm going to put these in and see how that goes. Okay, let's give it another try. Okay, that seems to be sitting a whole lot better. So let's attach the other leg. Let's see how it fits. This in here. Like that. Okay, there we go. That looks pretty good. Now for the sit test. Yeah, I think that'll do. I think the height is perfect, pretty stable, and I can move it around without it falling apart. So I think that checks all the boxes. Okay, so the last thing that we need to do is see how well this thing folds away. Let's take it apart. And it's not the most simple task, but I think it'll do. So it's going to be packed away something like this. Just have to line up all of these holes, and that's how it's going to be packed away. So in order to strap it down, I went and bought this belt or webbing and this clip over here. But now I realize that, let's just open this up, that this is going to somehow need to be sewed onto the end like this. My wife has a sewing machine upstairs, but I'm not extremely handy with the sewing machine, so I'm going to use a kind of leather rivet to stick this together. So these are the rivets that I'm going to use. These are obviously meant for leather, but I'm hoping they're going to work here. So I'm going to use a leather punch to punch these holes. Obviously this is not the ideal material for punching, because when you cut this webbing it does start to fray, but I'm hoping that the rivet is going to sort of keep it in place. Okay, well, it didn't go too bad. I managed to punch a hole in there. Another one in here. Well, that's actually pretty good. So now I'm going to stick this in from the bottom. Stick these in from the top. Okay, I'm just going to run over to my anvil quickly and flatten these. That's just great. Now I went and put the rivets in the wrong way around. I wanted the nice bit to be at the top. Okay, I'm just going to cut that off and do it again. Okay, I think that looks better. I went ahead and folded this double, so there's no chance of it fraying over here. Didn't line them up perfectly, but who cares? So let me just get a rough measurement of what I think we're going to need. Just going to take that measurement times 2. I think should be fine. That should be able to go through here and then still tie off. So let's cut this off, burn this edge. Okay, I'm not going to lie, that's not the simplest thing to do, but I think it's something that I can live with. So carry it around like that. It may be very convenient if we need to take it apart. Taking it apart is obviously going to be a lot easier than folding it up again. But I guess the most important thing is that I'm going to have to just go and check if this fits inside my hockey bag. It should, because I took all the measurements of the inside of the hockey bag. I'll just show you a bit of B-roll here of how that goes, but I think for now I'm done with this project. So let me give you my final thoughts. Okay guys, so finally that brings us to the end of this project, and you are probably just as relieved as I am after all of the stress that we had with Shaper 3D. Up until this point I still haven't heard anything back from them, but luckily I was able to find a workaround to the problem. Now I know this video is probably extremely long. I've got no idea how long yet because I have yet to start editing it. But for the 5 or 6 other people in the world who are like me, who appreciate long form, in-depth content, I hope you guys at least find this useful. Now I know that there are way more experienced CNC users out there who probably have much better workflows than the one that I've just demonstrated to you. But the point of this video is not to show you how to do it, but it's to show you my workflow and hopefully help you pick out the parts that work for you and incorporate them in your workflow. You know, when I first got my CNC machine roughly 2 years ago, I couldn't find any videos showing a complete workflow from start to finish, you know, designing a project and getting it ready for CNC cutting, creating toolpaths, and then eventually making the whole product. So this whole video is basically just a culmination of everything that I've learned over the last 2 years. So I really enjoy sharing my knowledge, and this whole project, excluding the stress that we had along the way, was a lot of fun for me to do. This has been an idea that I've been wanting to do for quite some time. I think I've mentioned it in some previous videos, and at last I've gotten around to doing it. Now, creating this content is obviously not my full-time job. I've had to carve out some time between all of the commission jobs that I currently have, and unfortunately I've had to spend quite a bit more time than I planned on. But it's done and I'm really happy. Now, if you guys enjoy this type of content and you want me to create more of these in-depth tutorials, I'd be really interested to hear about that in the comment section below. If you'd like me to do a similar project but a more complex one, breaking it up into sections and doing shorter videos of all of the steps, I'm also willing to do that. But that all depends on what you guys want. You know, I don't want to make a whole bunch of content that no one wants to watch. So you guys tell me what it is that you'd like me to do and I'll be happy to share my knowledge. So as for the actual stool, obviously this is not a super nice looking stool because this is not super nice material. But as I said earlier, it ticks all the boxes of what I wanted to achieve with this project. I do happen to have a laminated pine shelving which is the same thickness as this, so I may go ahead and make myself a much nicer one of this in the future. But for the meantime, I think I'm just going to put this one through its paces first and see how it holds up. And if there are any flaws in this design, I'm pretty sure they will pop up in due time. In which case I can just improve upon my design in version 2.0. And lastly, I just want to mention that I will be selling all of the files for this project on my website. I will be including the PDF, the DFX files, the Shaper 3D files, the Illustrator files. I'll have them all included, and the nice thing is that if you do use Shaper 3D, you will be able to open the full file just as I saved it, with the full history tree and all of the variables included. So if you want to make the chair slightly taller or slightly wider or use a different thickness of material, it'll be as easy as inputting those numbers and you'll be able to export the vectors for your specific project. Now obviously some of you, if you want this chair, are going to go ahead and follow the tutorial and model and make it yourself. I'm not selling these files on my website because I think they're worth anything. It's just another way for me to attempt to earn a little bit more income. So even if you don't plan on making this tool, but you would like to help me or my channel, purchasing these files from my website would go a long way in achieving that. So with all that said, I don't want to take up any more of your time. I'd just like to thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video or found it helpful, let me know in the comment section below. If you know of anyone else who would be interested in this project, it would be great if you could share it with them. And until next time, keep making stuff.